Our video games art debate has been raging on for quite a while, but I think it's fair to say that we're at the point where the answer is starting to become yes for a lot more people. We're beginning to see more ways games can convey different stories and themes in ways that books, film, or television couldn't convey before. Granted, the conversations usually die by game journalists talking about the latest Oscar bait Sony game, but you also have some video essays talking about another artsy indie game as well. However, there's one type of game that gets left out of this conversation often. You can probably tell what it is if you can read. So, I'd like to present to you with a question to consider throughout the video. Are multiplayer games art? Well, first, we need to understand why these games are usually dismissed immediately. The first main reason multiplayer games haven't been a huge part of the games as art discussion is that they usually lack a focus on story that games attempting to be art usually have. Most of the time, they're focused on giving you a fun experience with friends or strangers, and aren't really worried about telling a specific type of story. Or if there is a connection to a story, usually the game is non-canon. The best example of this is Overwatch, which the gameplay is barely anything to do with the actual plot, which is instead told through cinematics on other things. And this isn't even commenting on the actual quality of the story. I already made a video on that, which still mostly holds up. With Halo, there is a focus on story in the single player, but it's mostly irrelevant in the multiplayer, as you're left wondering why two groups of super soldiers are fighting in the middle of a box canyon. Not to say this is always the case, though. Titanfall 2's multiplayer games are justified by two different factions duking it out in a war-like setting, with plenty of foot soldiers to solidify the fantasy, as well as an extraction minigame for the team that loses. And besides, we're only talking about PvP shooters, and there's plenty of different games for different people. How about we talk about a historically artistic driven genre, like, say, fighting games? One of the best things about fighting games in general is how they do characterization. While sure, fighting games usually have a story-focused mode or arcade nowadays, a lot of the interesting stuff comes from a general one-on-one gameplay that's typically done with another person. Take special intros, for instance, as while you'll typically have characters with a few generic responses to characters you're not really attached to, you will sometimes have special interaction between the characters, like Ryu and Ken sharing a small gesture before the fight, recontextualizing the battle from a regular fight to a friendly sparring match. Speaking of Ken and Ryu, differences in animations how certain moves are performed can also tell a lot about the character. From just seeing their movesets contrasted, you can tell that Ryu is more concerned with the practicality of fighting and wanting to improve, while Ken is just more of a showman. You can also establish the power of certain characters, as while everyone else in Guilty Gear gets knocked out if you reduce their health to 0, shocker I know, Nagoriyuki just lies down pretending to have lost because he's immortal. I could talk about how fight games are great at characterization and how every fight is its own story. However, let's go back to another wrinkle of multiplayer games that kind of gets in the way of them being discussed as an art form. The live service model. The live service trend is something that every major modern game is beginning to chase, and it's detrimental to multiplayer games becoming an art form. Something to consider about art is that it's often tied to a certain time period, and live services completely spin in the face of this. Let's take Fortnite, for example. At first it started out with some form of an art style, however with all the crossovers and the major gameplay changes over the years, you probably wouldn't even recognize it compared to when it started. This is some statement I'm pulling off the nascent experience I never had, as my introduction to Fortnite was the OG season, and going from it to Chapter 5 felt like the game I was familiar with had been flipped on its head. The movement was different, the time to kill was significantly faster, there were a lot more quests and activities, there are NPCs now, the guns now had 4 different prefixes, there was now a currency system, it's just hard to keep up with. It's like if a movie kept getting updated with new characters, plot twists, tone shifts, whatever, until eventually it's not even the same movie anymore. If you want to see how old Fortnite was whenever you want, too bad. Again, you can't really judge Fortnite as anything anymore because any complaint or praise you give to the game outside of ingrained mechanics and the live service model can be completely irrelevant in the next month or so. Another example of the live service washing away an original vision is Overwatch. as some characters are now completely unrecognizable from what they were before, at least moveset wise. There's also Overwatch 2 the factor, which is a sequel which completely washes away the first game, so now we can't really see the original creator's vision again, which is doubly so since Jeff Kaplan is now completely uninvolved with the project. However, there's another way to look at how live services can influence the artistry of a game, and that's the game itself being a time capsule of how a game can evolve. And what better game to discuss after a good Overwatch bashing than TF2? Team Fortress 2 could be one of the earliest examples of an FPS game adopting a live service model. It results in multiple areas of map design and characterization piling onto each other. The core design is there, but you get to see the evolution of TF2's map design, from Dust Bowl to Mercenary Park. It's why the game retains its classic feel, as the update model didn't focus on redefining the gameplay like, say, Fortnite, but rather expanding it. There's also the storytelling with not just the comics and videos, but also within the gameplay through the different maps and modes added, and the new details added, such as the scars on the sniper after Meet the Spy, and a chance of bread spotting from a teleporter following expiration date. However, this might have changed of fading away, because after 5 years of basically doing nothing, Valve has now started to add more content in droves. This community content is mostly harmless. However, there are specific cases where the content can clash with the artistic vision of the game. The best example being certain tacky cosmetics are pushed by groups like the TF2 Emporium. Some people may argue, well, TF2 was always wacky. Who cares when we have more boundary-pushing cosmetics? But TF2 had a defined sense of humor that wasn't just completely random. There's a clear difference in the silly cosmetics that are officially made by Valve and the ones that are thrown in now. And don't even get me started on holiday cosmetics. There's simply no excuse for them. As for the game modes, you can also say that Zombie Infection doesn't really fit the style of TF2 at all, as with some of the Christmas maps. This is some opinion that I exclusively hold. This is a shared sentiment among many members of the TF2 community, as they value the game as something more than just a fun shooter. They value the art style, the characters, and the setting. It's the same reason why the latest Warpaint case and Krampus map were praised so much. It's because they were both high quality and fit with the art style and story of TF2. However, multiplayer games aren't limited to only PvP. How about we talk about the artistic aspirations of a recent PvE game that has captured the attention of many? While a lot of people only really view Lethal Company through the lens of, haha, funny game to play with friends, it's a lot more than just that. If anything, Lethal Company is one of the best pieces of horror media for numerous different reasons. The first is that games are a perfect fit for the horror genre, because while other mediums have to justify and present as action, in a horror game, you're the idiot being chased by the scary monster. You know your own thought process. The monsters are another part of the puzzle that makes the game horrifying, as a lot of them can easily throw a monkey wrench into your plan of getting a ton of scrap and leaving alive. Like the Bracken that forces you to pay attention occasionally, the Coilhead that demands full eye contact, the Nutcracker, which is a shotgun making an entire area incredibly dangerous to approach, or the Mimic, which can infect your whole team. It can make you regret teleporting the wrong person. They're not wholly original concepts, but the beauty comes from the combinations you can face along with the randomized situations. That's another thing. While a typical horror movie, you'll get scared the first time viewing it, but it becomes progressively less scary upon repeat watches. With Lethal Company, you never know what the game will throw at you, as the room layouts and monster encounters are random. But all this can be done with a single-player game. What makes Lethal Company work as a horror experience that can be only achieved with multiplayer? The first reason allows higher stakes and more dangerous enemies without often being frustrating. The snare flea would normally be unreasonably punishing with little room for counterplay, but next to the multiplayer nature, it's now a minor inconvenience if you have a weapon. Likewise, the Mimic would just be a one-dimensional get grabbed and you die enemy, but thanks to the presence of multiple players, not only can you interrupt and grab by high one of your teammates to kill it, but there's also an additional threat if it succeeds, as now there's two Mimics chasing after you. You also have proximity chat to further enhance the multiplayer experience, as while you can effectively communicate with your teammates when close, Your connection is immediately cut when going too far apart, causing tension. There's no foolproof way to reliably know if everyone's okay, outside of walkie-talkies. Also, just hearing someone's voice get cut off when they die, it just adds that horror movie experience of hearing a side character die off screen. Finally, one of the best parts of Lethal Company is how it punishes you. If someone dies, you get penalized by having your money deducted, but this punishment is reduced when you recover a money, causing another risk-reward factor of trying to minimize the damage of a death or ensure that the punishments won't stack up. If everyone dies, not only do you lose 80% of your money, but to add insult to injury, you lose all scrap on board. There's a greater incentive to try to leave if everyone's dead. It makes some tough decisions if you're going to risk your life for the scrap that might be needed for the quota. One final punishment: if you don't meet the quota, the game is over. This is self-explanatory, and it adds not only soft punishments for minor losses, but a hard punishment if you decide to play it too safe or too risky. This all adds up to the creative experience like being in a horror movie, as no round plays out the same and the different twists and encounters can result in some incredibly tense and dramatic situations. There's multiple types of horror all being explored, whether it being jump scared by an enemy you didn't expect, or the dread of trying to escape a facility where it's uncertain that anyone's still alive, or the thrill of dreammates chasing you down in the middle of the snow. Once again, Lethal Company is anything but one note. Heck, me describing it in this long section doesn't even begin to do it justice, as there's so much I can continue to mention, but I've rambled for too long. Now all this is nice, but why did I say it? Well, I got sidetracked and ended up going on a Lethal Company praise session. It shows how multiplayer games can be used to create big emotions other than simple competition or fun with friends, which in this case is horror. Each run is its own story, which will result in deciding whether a story is a tragedy or a comedy. Sure, there's some lore and story behind the game in text logs, but that's a secondary story to the real story of you and 3 other guys trying to fill a never-ending quota. You know what? I still think we're just scratching the surface. All of what I said could be neat in terms of storytelling or making the players feel something other than excitement. However, I feel we're yet to get a game that fully combines these elements to make something truly unique. The pieces are all there, however we're still not quite there to make a multiplayer game that every video essayist praises for being a masterpiece for the next 10 years. Outside of maybe TF2, but that might be a stretch. Should every multiplayer game be trying to become the next piece of major art? No, as you can have an amazing game that's simply fun. TF2 is my favorite game of all time for a reason. But if I had to answer the question I asked, can multiplayers be art? I have to say, yeah, but we're not there yet. Thanks for watching, Tony Nick, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, thanks for 500 subscribers. Goodbye.